Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's training. This is going to be a fun one. We have Marlon Gibbons, which Marlon Gibbons has composed music for for TV and advertising as well, which also includes various different media projects. His music has appeared in thousands of TV programs and commercials around the globe, such as, well, these are some cool ones. Reading this list, I was like, this is awesome. We have ABC's Bachelor, American Idol, Dancing with the Stars, Access Hollywood, NFL Now, Temptation Island, Amazing Race, Archer, Discovery Channel, CNN, and Australia's Got Talent. It's really cool. That's just to name a few. In 2005, Marlon's music was used in a video game for PlayStation, opening his eyes to the production of music. After, after graduating from Recording Arts Canada, for music production and audio engineering, he made his way north, where he's worked ever since. He's been working out of a bedroom-sized studio, which I could relate to that, leveraging the power of internet to provide music for clients and publishers around the world. Marlon is endorsed by GHS Strings, Hotone Audio, and Warm Audio, which is awesome. So put your hands together for Marlon Gibbons.
How's everyone doing? I see there's a huge, of course, the sun's coming in right as we start. I'm sorry, I don't have a blind there. There we go. So thank you for the intro. I appreciate it. And thank you for everyone that's watching. Just to, I guess, touch a little bit or I guess expand a little bit more on the intro. This specific industry I'm in, we would call that, production music. And it's typically used more for television and media projects, as opposed to scoring a full film, so to speak. There we go. I'm just trying to get rid of that glare. Sorry. So yeah, what I do is I typically produce music for short commercials, 30-second commercials, 15-second commercials, and write specifically for non-scripted television. So that would be like your reality television shows. That's kind of, where I fell into. Before getting into this or before finding this industry, I had the thought that to be a composer, that simply meant you wrote for screen and picture, like, Hollywood composer doing the big blockbuster. I thought that was the only definition of a composer. And it's really, really not. That's one of so many different facets of creating music. And so, for example, there's, screen and picture composer that you would typically, Hollywood kind of thing. And then there's, your advertising composers. They work on different pieces of music. It's short, it's intense, it's a whole different pace. The different creative approach because you're, kind of compacting a whole story into 30 seconds. You don't have 2 hours to 2 hours to push out this story. And then, of course, like I said, what I fell into, production music. How that happened, where was in 2004, 2005, I think it was, I entered a contest, and the contest was called Sims PlayStation, or sorry, Sims Space Station, but it was for PlayStation. And what it was just a random contest. Anybody could enter. And I'm dating myself here. This is way back, like more MySpace era. And, Facebook wasn't what it is today. Neither was YouTube, but there were some platforms. And I entered this contest and I won. What I entered was an orchestral piece. I used, I had a big Korg Triton keyboard, big silver beast. And that was mostly what I used for the orchestral samples. And I entered this piece, I won. And what happened was they sent me a check for the use of that, a licensing check. So for the use of that music in their game. And that was the first time I had really been paid for the music I was writing and had loved to do. I had a day job and everything else, so it wasn't really at that time a career, a thought, for career. So they sent me this check, and it was just kind of one of those, oh, okay, well, let's see where else this goes. And I want more of this, where, like, again, I didn't know this industry really existed. And it's often referred to as needle drop or library music. And at that time, didn't have a great reputation. It was kind of compared to, the clip art of graphic design, the clip art logos that are just kind of cheesy and horrible. And a lot of that was due to the technology. It just wasn't as advanced as it is today. So the music, sounded kind of cheesy. You play saxophone on a keyboard, you kind of know it's not the real thing. So it was a lot of that. I started to learn what music libraries were, but there wasn't a lot of resources. Like we were mentioning earlier, I really had no idea whose door to knock on or where to get again, as I said, YouTube wasn't what it is. So I really had no resources other than, trying to research, online. It was limited, but what music libraries were, how you get your music there. And it started to open this, door, or this realization that the average producers, musicians like myself with, a few $100s of computer equipment in your bedroom could produce music that was actually getting played on TV shows. And again, I come back to that thing where I thought the only way you could achieve something like that was to be someone notable in, LA or New York. And that you would have to be hired by a network or a show or a production company to be, have your music in there. But that's not the case at all. It's really, if the music fits, it's in a publishing catalog, and if it fits for whatever scene or whatever they're trying to do, then you can have your music placed. So, and I didn't have to be in LA. Of course, that probably would have helped, but I didn't have to be there. I could be here. I could be doing my day job, gigging on the weekends or the evenings, and life was, great. And I didn't need this $1 million studio because computers were becoming more and more powerful. So you could, add more tracks, and the equipment was producing better results, better preamps, microphone, and just higher fidelity. So the music was becoming better and better. So that whole industry was growing because the quality of the music was getting better and better. And I started, I went down a few paths that probably shouldn't have, or, I started learning about contracts and what was fair and what wasn't, because again, I really had nothing to go on. I was just, tripping and falling everywhere, and kind of making a mental note of, okay, don't do that again, or don't go down, don't say this again, or don't go down this path again. So it was kind of a trial by fire, but I didn't know where. I was learning as I went, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And as that kind of went on, I learned more, and I started opening a few more doors, and I started meeting people, meeting the people behind these companies, and getting to know the different, I guess, personalities in the industry. A little different because I wasn't dealing with artists per se, and I've never called myself an artist in that respect. That it wasn't, I don't release my music, Spotify or iTunes or anything like that. It was really just creating music for a purpose, so for television. So getting to know these people were different, in different key roles. So because there's different people that can help you, that can help place your music in these different shows. So over time, several years, obviously, as I said, these relationships became better and stronger. more opportunities started to come out of it. I started to meet more people. My music started to become better because I knew how to write, or I was learning how to write specifically for the shows, because there is, form and things that you can do that tailor a piece of music to be more fitting for the industry that I'm in, as opposed to a song to be released, publicly. So I just kind of, kept going down that path. More doors and opportunities started to open. I started to get into advertising, which is a little bit different, and I'll kind of get into that as well. But it's a very different world. The budgets are very different, they're structured differently. The people you work with, you work typically with music houses and ad agencies, as opposed to music libraries and publishers. The music, although its job is to support picture, it's a little different, because again, with advertising, you're trying to sell a product, you're supporting emotion, which is what TV music does, but you have a certain time frame to do that in. So you really need to tell a story, and it needs to be what, coincide with the picture, and in a short period of time. And the creative briefs that you're given, the direction is very specific and detailed as well. So along that journey, I started going down the music advertising path, which has been incredible. But I've kind of stayed in both lanes, and continued with the TV music too as well.
So we have a question here for you, Marlon.
Absolutely.
Somebody would like to know what the game was you did music for.
It is Sims Space Station. I'm sure there's somewhere, if you look that up. They changed names a couple times, but Sims, obviously the Sims was the whole franchise, right? And Space Station was the thing, and the track was called "On Top of the World" on the cut. It was kind of neat. It was again, because it was my first real placement. That was kind of special to me, and what started the whole thing. I had always played music and recorded music, but with no end in mind. Like, there was no real goal for me. It was just, I loved it, I enjoyed it, and I was just putting it on the various devices, the cassettes, and then the CDs, and eventually hard drives. And so, yeah. Was that just the one question?
Yes.
What else can I say here? Give me a second. Yeah, so talking about video games, there's different. So as I mentioned, what I do for TV, I write across so many different genres, from rock to pop to acoustic to dark, scary, ominous kind of stuff, to orchestral, to just fun, quirky stuff. I've written an album full of carnival-esque type music. All these themes get used in different TV shows. So I've always gone across that spectrum of music. However, for video games, it doesn't quite work the same. I was lucky to have that contest, and that's the only video game credit I have. But it was my first, so that's why I always lead with that. But typically, video game companies like EA or whoever hire a composer for their various games, and that's a whole different form. So it's not typically where these video games are picking up tracks to just throw in a game. There's usually a hired composer, just like a film. And then again, with the movies, same kind of thing. Although movies will use production music occasionally, or a song. They might hear a song of an artist. Well, you hear it all the time. Think of Grey's Anatomy, right? They're one of the great shows for bringing new artists to light, mostly for their songs or their adaptations of existing songs. So the film, TV show, program, they also will have a hired composer, but they'll also use music occasionally. They'll have what's called a music supervisor, and that music supervisor will curate the music for that outside of what the composer is doing, but will curate any songs or anything that's going to be placed in the film or the project.
We actually have a few more questions.
Sure, yeah.
Pertaining to what you're just talking about. How would you go about getting your music placed in production libraries or with music agencies? Is it hard to get the attention of music supervisors?
Starting with the music libraries, if you Google music libraries 2020, 2019, music production libraries, production music libraries, all those different combinations of keywords, you'll get a list of so many libraries. They're not hard to find. And right now, from my experience, the ones I know of that they've been blowing up during this whole COVID thing, that even though the production is down on the TV sets, like the shows aren't filming because obviously they can't have a bunch of staff on a set. The libraries are doing a lot of admin and a lot of, energizing their catalog and building their catalog and getting new tracks in. So when, things do resume, that they can kind of hit the ground running. And so a lot of libraries are accepting submissions now. And so if you find them, the things that I would highly recommend, depending on who you want to work with, it's like, I always say it's like a job interview. Try and do your research about them first, who they are, how big they are, who their clients are. Listen to their catalog, listen to the quality of music they have. And like I said, who their clients are, so who the shows they're getting their music placed in, or are they new and they're just starting out, which can be good or bad, because maybe it's great to get on the ground floor with them and they have a lot of potential, or maybe they don't have any way of, if you get your music with them, it's just going to sit on a shelf. So how to get to them specifically is, I would say 90% of the time, they will tell you on their website. It's usually on their contact page, but somewhere on there will say submissions or artist submissions or submit music here. They'll tell you. They're usually pretty clear to tell you how to submit your music to them. Really important, follow their rules exactly, however they say. If they say submit 3 MP3s of your best quality, then do just that. Don't think, I'll give them 10 because that's my best work. They're not going to listen past 3. If they say send streaming links only, then do just that. The reason I say this is because they are usually so busy and inundated with solicitations, people wanting to get their music into the library and ultimately placed on television, is that they don't have, their time is very valuable, so they don't have a lot of time to go beyond what they've asked you for. You need to make their job as easy as possible. They'll appreciate that. And again, if you're doing something that they've specifically asked you not to, it's just a bad way to start a relationship. So usually it's on the website of the library that you find how to submit to them, and specifically what. A lot of times people will ask, well, what kind of tracks should I submit? Or they'll think that they should reach out to the library and say, what are you looking for? Don't do that. Listen to the library, listen to all the music in there. Usually there's a cross section of stuff from hip hop to rock to metal to cinematic, orchestral. Like usually they have a lot. Some libraries will specialize in, say, singer-songwriter, acoustic folk. That might be what they have most of. Some might be hip hop and electronic. But again, that's you'll find that in the research you do, hearing their stuff. But what I was going to say back to the other point was, if you're submitting your music to them, it's not so much that they want you to submit the tracks that you're going to place in their catalog. It's that they want to hear the quality of your music. They want to hear how well you produce. Sometimes, yes, those tracks can ultimately end up in their catalog, but usually when you send them music as they've requested, they're assessing your ability to produce music, whether it's rock or heavy metal or orchestral or acoustic, or even as a vocalist or any of those things. They're looking at the quality first and then the viability of that second. And then I think, sorry to run on with that, but then your second question was video games? Something to do with video game?
The second part of that question was, is it hard to get the attention of music supervisors? But you answered that.
Well, not directly, because music supervisors are a different profession. And yes, it's very hard to get a music supervisor's attention, extremely hard, because as busy as these music libraries are, music supervisors are often even busier. Most of the few that I know, the most already have their resources. So although they're always open to finding that next greatest track for the project, most don't want their phone ringing and you soliciting to them. They have trusted relationships that they usually go to. And a lot of times it's libraries that they use as part of their resource or their, network, and trusted libraries that deliver. But they, it could be iTunes, it could be Spotify, it could be just on the scene and having their colleagues recommend people to them. So again, it's almost, solicited, but through a friend, colleague. So it's trusted. It is very hard to get the attention of a supervisor. If you're going to reach out to a supervisor, my recommendation, if you find them on, say, LinkedIn or where it's not hard to find music supervisors, and it's not hard to find out what they're working on. But that's the key, is to, if you're going to reach out to one, have something of value to bring to them. For example, if you look up, you find a supervisor, look at what they're working on. Maybe there's a show or a program currently in production that they're working on. If you can, if it's maybe it's a season 2 or 3 of something, or a movie where the theme, the music, so you have an idea of what they're working on. You know what I mean? You've done your homework. That'll put you a lot further in their good books, if you can get their time. But that'll put you further ahead than have just a cold call. Say, hey, I write music. Can I get you some music? That's probably not going to get you that far. So try and do your homework and research before you reach out to a music supervisor. But they're certainly valuable people to know if you can get a relationship with one.
Cool.
Any other questions there?
Yeah, I got a list of a few questions here.
Sure.
So what software, library, plugins, etc. do you tend to use for virtual or orchestral instrument sounds? This person has been getting much better at orchestration abilities lately and have tried considering paying for quality software for that purpose, although fantastic free sounds are always gems.
Right. I have so many different brands that I deal with. Spitfire is incredible. Heaviosity is another incredible, library. ADO, so it's number 8, IDO. They make incredible stuff. Native Instruments is another incredible, full of, whether it's orchestral or sound design type stuff. So if one of the, I guess, like the Swiss Army knife of music libraries would be, sample libraries, would be Native Instruments Complete, and Complete is spelled with a K. There's Complete Ultimate. There's different sizes of this package, and it's incredible because it really gives you a little bit of everything. It gives you, kind of classic analog synths, all virtual, of course. It gives you, acoustic type instruments, pianos. It'll give you orchestral instruments as well. And it's all these different companies, some that I even mentioned, that kind of contribute to this package. And it's a great start for, getting into this kind of thing, the sample library world. As far as freebies, I get emails now and again with, free plugins and that kind of thing, but I really don't know where to go to get free, actual library samples. Sorry.
Alrighty, that was a good answer for all of that. Next question is, if you dealt directly with someone who needed music for their YouTube videos or vlog posts, how would you go about making a contract for that?
You can, there's stuff online. You can, sorry, I'm really trying to get away from the sun going in here. I don't have blinds on this, so I'm trying to, so you can find stuff online, because let's face it, not everybody has, a couple grand to go see a lawyer and get a contract for something that might earn you $100, so there are contracts you might be able to find online, just Googling something, alter the wording, to your liking that you both agree on. I don't want to give legal advice because I'm not qualified to do so by any means. But I really want to stress the importance of having a contract in place. Something that you both, even if it's something at the very least that you type up and you both sign and agree to. And even if it's a friend, it further, protects that friendship. Just to have on paper, there's no, less chance of miscommunication or misunderstanding in that case. Well, you said on the phone, and then you have to both provide your interpretation of what was said and no record of it. So yeah, contracts, most of the people I deal with have contracts, publishers and so forth. They can be very overwhelming to read and understand. But a lot of the language does get to be similar. They're just said differently. And what you would want to, I guess, determine, there'd be other things too, but you would want to, what kind of compensation you're getting for, say, the YouTube, if anything at all. Maybe that compensation, it doesn't have to be monetary. Maybe that compensation is credit. Maybe it's, maybe there's something else in the way of money that you're getting. But have that, whatever that is, in the contract, and as well as terms. So if you're doing music for somebody's YouTube channel, awesome, but it would kind of suck to find out that they went and put together an album and used that track on an album and are selling the album and making money off that album when your agreement was that it was only for their YouTube channel. So just all those things. So what the use is for, how long they are allowed to use it, what your rights are, are you giving them exclusive rights to use that music and you can't use it, or can you both use it? So there's a lot of terms, and a lot of that stuff can be found, but where to get contracts, to be quite honest, in my experience, usually the client or the publisher I've dealt with have provided the contracts. So I don't have, in my possession. But like I said, if you needed something, just get something in writing that you both kind of agree to and are 100% clear on what that says. It's really important.
Awesome. So for the next question, it's a short one. Is it difficult to compose music for film and TV when it isn't necessarily for yourself?
Um, yes and no. It depends on the situation. Um, I've had challenges where I've been asked to. So I get commissioned through two clients that have me produce full albums. And those albums are specifically for television, but there's usually a theme to those albums. And as an example, one of those albums, some of the tracks had to have a sense of confusion. So I had to figure out how to musically create that entity, confusion. Like, how do you create confusion, like with music? So things like that, they're really fun because you get to be super creative about it. But it's very challenging. And other times, it's for me in the sense that this is, I love doing this, and it's my creative approach. I'm sometimes guided told what it has to sound like, maybe what instrumentation, what the emotion has to be. But I love it. I don't usually have too much trouble. I hit roadblocks like anyone else, of course. If I have 12 tracks to do on an album, and I typically do that in maybe 3 or 4 weeks, that's a lot of work. And then you have to be solely responsible for mixing and editing and creating. We'll get into that, but creating various versions of that music. So usually, maybe track 7 or 8, you start to think, well, I've used all my ideas. What else? How am I going to start this next track? Or you have a little, say, guitar riff, and you're like, oh, I used that in 3 other tracks. So sometimes it's the marathon, like it's the how much work is there can be daunting. That's more challenging than the actual creative ideas. So, and just to take that a little bit further, is writing it for television. If I'm not writing an album specifically for a theme, then sometimes I'm writing, whether it's for a television show or I'm writing to a narrative, something that, common narratives on television are, anxiety, reveals. Think of reality television shows, right? Like, oh, up next, or they're about to reveal the winner, or so there's a lot of hype and tension and build, and then the reveal. Or some of the shows like Temptation Island or something, like a lot of heartbreak and love stories, and so you can write to that narrative. You can write to sad, melancholy type stuff. Jealousy, anger. It doesn't have to be genre specific. A lot of times it's more about the emotion of what you're trying to write. So whether you pick up an acoustic guitar and do something, or piano, whatever instrument it is that you're proficient in, just creating that mood, more so can be a great music production track, more so having a specific genre track. You know what I mean by that? So yeah, just right to the emotion of whatever that emotion is. Sorry, I don't know if I confused whoever just asked that, but sorry. But yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. This kind of goes into the next question. In terms of form and song structure, are there any do's and don'ts for structuring songs that are more likely to get placed?
I guess there's two approaches to this. I'm not a singer-songwriter per se. Like I play live and gig and stuff, but I'm a cover artist, so I do covers. When I'm in the studio, if I'm writing for TV, it's not songs that I'm doing. So I'm not doing it, an intro and verse and chorus, pre-chorus, Brit. Like, it's not traditional song form. So if you're writing for production music, there's always exceptions to the rule, but quite often they'll start out very minimalistic. So again, maybe just a few notes on the piano, pardon me. And there might be a little shaker or something very subtle. And then after 4 or 8 bars, it's not a hard rule, but after so many bars, add something else. So maybe a second guitar comes in, or a cello or strings or a synth, an underlying synth or a pad, maybe a vocal, it's endless. The options are endless, but the idea is that every so many bars, you're building on that initial idea. You can hand off that idea. So maybe it's a simple chord progression or note motif with the piano. And then after so many bars, another instrument takes over what you started with. And then it's maybe bass and simple drums are in there at that point. And it gets a little bigger. And then there might be 3 or 4 sections. And by the end of the track, it's huge. It's really big. It's very common for music production libraries, to have tracks like that, where they start out very minimalistic, and then by the end they're huge and they've grown. So that's a common form. That's one. I know video editors that love lots of transitions and transitional effects. So that could be reverses, swells, swooshes, anything that could be used to cut to another scene. So you're really trying to get into the video editor's head, like what they're going to do creatively. And if you can do something that helps them and makes their job easier, you're doing better. So yeah, that's another way to kind of good with the form. It doesn't have to be a massive. That's important too. It doesn't have to be a massive track, a massive session. You don't have to have 50 instruments. It doesn't have to be, a 60-piece orchestra to be a good produced track. It can be acoustic guitar and, whatever instrument you choose. And then again, in that case, try and have, if you can, different sections that they can cut. So maybe if you're using, say, one instrument, it starts out finger picked, very light, and then in the middle gets a little heavier. Maybe it's kind of palm muting and playing, and then by the end you're strumming with a pick, and there's 2 or 3 guitars. So you could still build even with one instrument and create that energy and dynamic, if that makes sense.
That's wicked. That's a lot like songwriting. But we're going to come back to some of these questions later on. I know that you have some other topics that you had in mind to cover. So
Sure. One of the other things I was going to say, it kind of ties into what we've been talking about is the importance of relationships. And it took me a long time to kind of get into that, or learn how important that was. But if you can meet the people behind the scenes, and what I mean by that is, of course, I'm talking about music production libraries, but whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, maybe you want to get into video games. Maybe you're looking to be a sound designer for, various networks, or an independent sound designer, or you're going to create sample packs or beats and, license those. No matter what it is, whatever path you're trying to get down, I know it sounds cliche, but it's really important. If you can find people on the inside and approach them not in a way to ask, what they can do for you, or ask them for favors, provide value to them. If you have something that you might think might be of value to them. Of course, you've researched who they are. That's why you're reaching out to them. Find out what it is they're passionate about, or maybe a project they're working on, and talk to them about that, and maybe somehow tie in what it is. If you're trying to get them your tracks, is just an example. If you can tie in maybe somehow how your tracks are similar to the project they're working on. If it does happen to be a musical library, you can reach out to them and ask them questions. Maybe it's a phone call. Yes, they're extremely busy, but sometimes, you can reach the people behind the scenes. They might have administrative staff. maybe you can talk to the staff. And again, just get to know the people and sell yourself on who these to these people. Sell yourself as well as your music. So yeah, relationships. Honestly, everything that I've ever done that I'm proud of, I can point to somebody who's helped me in one way or another accomplish that. Whether it's getting a job or get various TV placements or whatever it is, I can always point to somebody who helped me that I've had a relationship with along the way that I've helped them and then they've returned a favor, or I really can't emphasize enough how important relationships are. So that would be a really big one. What else? Okay, the other one that I was going to mention too is it kind of ties into the relationships, but etiquette. So if you're going to reach out to a library and submit your music, or ask somebody to critique your music, or again, I don't want to narrow. I know everybody has different goals and ambitions and paths here, so I don't want to narrow this. I want to make it kind of generic, but if you're reaching out to somebody for the first time professionally, maintain that professionalism as much as you can. If it's email, and have someone look over your grammar, your spelling. Don't use slang. Be as professional as you can. It's not a buddy that you're reaching out to. It's even if it's someone on social media that, pardon me, you're gonna you're gonna hit them up and ask them to collaborate or something. Just in that initial outreach, be professional. Be as professional as you can. It really go a long way in developing that professional relationship. Further to that, as I said, don't use slang. Just down the road, if you develop a relationship with them, professional relationship, then you get to kind of have a feel for each other, and everything's kind of relaxed. Then that's cool. You can let the not your guard, but you can let that go a little more. But yeah, just be professional. Spell their name right. Just and be brief. That's another important one too. Is that the people I work with, or at least in this industry, crazy busy, and they don't have time to be reading a huge bio. So if you're reaching out to them, be as brief as you can. Don't include a bunch of information that, although you might think is important, really try and audit yourself and give them only the valuable information, the information that they will find valuable. So etiquette is another one, and brevity, being really brief in your emails to them, and hopefully you get a reply, and if you do, that doesn't mean then you send them the huge long email. It means just keep it brief and keep trying to provide value and see how you can work together, and you can also bring something to the table. So that's an important one too. Another one I was going to talk on is social media. So marketing, super important, of course. Social media, I'm saying it's free. And there are campaigns you can pay for and get a further reach and all that kind of stuff. But it really is, because like I said, when I started, it was primitive. I didn't have the resources that are available now. Use it, whether it's whatever platform you're on. I don't want to, again, narrow the options here, but try and put your music out there if that's what it is that you're doing, or if you have kind of an artist, if your image is as an artist, definitely put that brand out, put that image out. Absolutely. interact with other professionals and people whose work you admire. It's really easy to, see a busy feed and throw your stuff on there, self-promoting, but it's really, it's just not classy. To somebody puts their work out there and it's getting great response, and you're trying to ride the coattails, throwing down your work on top of it. A better way to do that is compliment them on the awesome work that it is. People will see that you're a kind, supportive person. Maybe see who else is commenting on there. There's an opportunity to meet some more people, network. So just use social media as much as you can to put your stuff out there. Be to a certain degree, be humble about it and have a sense of humility and confident at the same time. But definitely use social media to leverage your image or your brand or your music as well. That's a great way to meet people. Was there more questions there, or do you want me to keep going?
Sure. Yeah, I could ask another question. So let's see what the latest one. The latest question is there a standard for how loud tracks should be mastered for libraries?
That's a really good question. And it does vary because some music libraries will want, I try and, depending on who I'm submitting my music to, maybe 6 dB under is kind of what I'll use. But a lot of times if I'm doing my own mastering or I'm just creating tracks for my own library, be a little different, be a little hotter. Some libraries want lots of headroom, so they're not, loud square waves, because they want to do their own mastering so that their catalog, which comprise of thousands of other producers, all has a cohesive sound to it as far as, mastering and that kind of thing. There is no one rule. If you're talking about Spotify, I was just talking to some friends about this today. If you're talking about, Spotify or some of the other platforms, that's a whole other conversation. I don't put my music out on those platforms, but there's a whole other, I guess, being penalized for tracks that are too hot and it crunches it and it just sounds horrible and a lot different than the way you mastered it. So as far as production libraries, it's always best to ask the library first how they prefer the tracks, or sometimes they'll give you, if they like your work, they'll provide a contract and submission, I guess, I don't know what to call it, but they'll tell you how and what they want submitted, what kind of versions of those tracks, and they'll tell you as far as mastering that, if they want it, super hot and full of energy, or if they want some headroom there because, again, they may do the mastering themselves. Sorry, I kind of go off on a tangent one of these questions. Sorry. I hope that answered it.
Yeah, that was perfect. I actually got another question about what DAW would you recommend for composing versus recording versus mixing / mastering?
It doesn't matter. It's kind of a cheap way out, but I use Logic X and I have Pro Tools. I have friends that swear by and use Cubase. I have friends that use Ableton Live. Reaper is another great one. They're all incredible. They all do very good things. And yes, some things are easier to do in various DAWs. I think really the most important thing is the ideas in your head and having a DAW that you're comfortable with and know how to, get those things in there. I personally like Logic X, but I wouldn't push that on somebody. I just like it because I know it really well. I've used it for years, and same with Pro Tools. So it's fast. I can just flow with it. Like I said, a lot of people I really respect use these other programs and have great results. But, it's one of those, I don't want to push one over the other. It's maybe worth checking out. Hit YouTube and find out, kind of those shootouts. But yeah, I like Pro Tools and for audio, and although lately I've been doing a lot more audio and Logic as well. Yeah.
Awesome. I believe that's all the questions we have for now.
Okay. Another thing I would mention is if library music is something that you think that you would be interested in getting into, going down. There's two different ways you can do this. There's what's called rights managed and royalty free. Royalty free being, this doesn't mean that the music can just be used anywhere and there's no credit in that respect. You still own the rights to the music. Royalty free typically means that you get paid a one-time upfront amount. Whereas, and I don't want to give any examples, but the opposite of that would be rights managed, which means royalties, once something has been broadcast on television, let's say, royalties would eventually trickle through. So how that process works, and that's what I've always done. One way is not necessarily better than the other. Again, this is just what my experience has been. I have, again, friends that do the royalty-free stuff and do really, really well. But typically, if I have a track that I've written and it's going to a publisher I work with, or whatever the case is, I will register that with, in my case, SOCAN, with SOCAN, but in the US, it's ASCAP, BMI, CSAC. I think there's another one in the US now too. Don't quote me. The reason I mention that is because you don't have to be affiliated with SOCAN, although I'm happy at SOCAN. But every country will have its own pro. Pro stands for Performance Rights Organization. They are the ones that look out for you and have your back, make sure that you're compensated when your music is played, either publicly or broadcast. So if I write a track and it goes to a publisher and then ultimately gets placed into a TV show, so Dancing with the Stars, that show will be required to submit what's called a cue sheet. It's an administrative sheet that basically lists all the music that they've used and what those tracks are and who owns the rights to that music. There's different rights, different shares, publishing shares and composer. It can get really messy, but I'm the writer in that case. So I have 100% of the writer's share. So I own the writer's share of that track. That eventually, if it's in, say, the US, it will go to, ASCAP or BMI. They will then forward it to SOCAN, and 6 months to a year later, it's a long wait, SOCAN will get record of that placement, and they will put that into my file, my records. And then quarterly, I'll receive a statement basically telling me where my placements have been, and in what shows and the details to that, and then of course a check as well in the earnings of that can vary greatly, but that's rights managed. Royalty free, you're not getting that royalty on the back end. So there's different angles. Pardon me, I'm losing my voice. I haven't gigged for 6 months and certainly not sang, so my voice isn't strong as it should be. But the two different ways you can go: royalty free, rights managed. But then there's another, I guess, facet to that, which is you can go exclusive or non-exclusive. And what that means is, let's say you have an album of tracks. Let's say you have 12 tracks you love these tracks, you just did this album, you think it would be perfect for TV, and you want to put that album with a library. So you You research who the music libraries are, and you're going to submit. Some libraries will offer exclusive and non-exclusive. And what that means is if you sign an exclusive deal, that means you cannot take those tracks and place them with another library in the hopes that you win the lottery there too. And then some libraries allow you to do that. Now, logically, you would think, well, I want to put my tracks not exclusively and spread them out. It's like having more lottery tickets, but it's not really like that, because you have sometimes the client using the tracks really want that exclusivity. So you think of, if, for example, it's a brand, this isn't always the case, but it's a product, it's a brand, and they pick a track, and they're, whatever their brand is, it really wouldn't suit the brand well or work well to have a competitor also using that exact same track, or another brand that is quite the opposite of what they're doing, but again using that same track. So sometimes clients using these tracks like the idea of, we spoke about trusting your resources. So sometimes these music shows, these networks have a few libraries they like to use exclusively and specifically. They like to know that music is that they're only going to find that music, in that library, not spread across a whole bunch of libraries. So sometimes it can help a lot more to have exclusive. It strengthens the relationships, and you can still get lots of opportunities from having your tracks exclusive to one library. What else was I going to mention? Was there any questions before I go on to the next one?
There's no questions from here,
okay.
But I do have a question of my own actually. What's been your favorite thing to score? Like what's been your favorite?
There's been a few. I guess there's a show on DirecTV called Undeniable. It started with Joe Buck, who is a sports announcer, and he it was referred to as like the Oprah Winfrey of sports. So basically, it's think about a stage, an audience, and he basically interviews famous celebrity athletes from Gretzky to Dennis Rodman to Derek Jeter to like just heroes, sports heroes. So I had the opportunity to write a piece of music, 1 minute long, to be used during the opening monologue for when he comes out and starts to introduce whoever that athlete is for that day. And it was supposed to be a one-off project, I guess. And it was the initial airing of the show. So the direction I got was that I had to start it very slow, and then again, like I spoke about earlier, build towards the end of this 1 minute. And the whole concept is that he will come out and say, at 9 years old, he was in his neighborhood, playing basketball, whatever, like just kind of give the story, right? And then, in his first year, professional ball, and then of course the intensity of the music starts to get a little bit bigger, and then by the end, it's a lot bigger. And please welcome, and then the whole hype thing. So I wrote this piece of music for the show. They used it in the show, and that's awesome. That's great. Really cool. I'm happy about this. What ended up happening was, and I didn't know this for 3 seasons later, they ended up using that piece of music in every single episode during their opening monologue. They've changed hosts, and I forget the host's name now, but they still use that piece of music. So it's however many episodes. I think they're on season 6 maybe, or season 5. And it's been incredible. Yeah, they keep keep using the music for the opening monologue. That doesn't happen all the time, but it's certainly welcomed when it does. But that was kind of a fun project because of how it came about and what happened. Pardon me. So I guess that's my favorite one. Something I was going to I mentioned also that kind of similar to the question earlier about what DAWs to use, equipment to use. So a lot of people starting out, what do I need? I would say you need a laptop and a decent set of headphones. That's super important because even with just that, you can create, really cool, interesting, things. But maybe it's, GarageBand, and you're taking loops, like the very simplest thing I can think of, and just, get to understand how mixing works and, the different levels of the tracks, learn about panning, putting effects on these different tracks. And, even GarageBand will let you do that. But a laptop and headphones is a great place to start. You don't need thousands of dollars of equipment to, kind of do that. If you're a little bit further than that, starting it with a simple, I'm saying interface, basically something you can plug a microphone into. Focusrite is the name. Yeah, Focusrite. They make a really cheap, affordable, but great, dependable, reputable. How many other descriptors can I use? But they make a great unit as well. I think Scarlett 2. I'm not sure what it is, but they make a great unit, affordable. And like I said, if you're on a Mac and Logic, I think there's some of these interfaces will come with free software or a limited version of software, whether it's Ableton or whatever it is. Microphones, again, don't be tricked into thinking you need a $5,000 Neumann to produce decent music. Certainly as you get more advanced and you understand audio and production a little better, then some of these tools will help you. But don't believe that simply having all the expensive gear will by default make your music sound better, because it's easy to screw it up too with the expensive stuff. So yeah, equipment, say your laptop or your desktop. Of course, RAM and processing speed will help when your sessions start to get a little bit bigger. But just for the simple stuff, headphones and a laptop will start you in the right space. Like I said, a little interface, and then the brands are, again, I can go on forever, the different brands that there are out there. But again, they don't have to be, I guess I'm just trying to overemphasize, they don't have to be thousands of dollars to get you started. It's really, again, just back to the ideas you have in your head and what you want to accomplish. And then of course the gear will come, because there's always, it'll always be there. You'll get the emails too. Was there any other questions, Marlon?
Yeah, there's another question here. Is there any room in music licensing for solo instrumental music, like flamenco guitar or solo jazz piano, or even, I dare say, a solo bass?
Absolutely, there is. Yes, it might not have the same call and demand as some of the other stuff, but the benefit to that is that you're not competing against the, dare I say, saturation of those other genres. There are absolutely themed albums of solo instrumental piano. It can be jazz, absolutely. You might see a scene in a movie or a show where they walk into a nightclub and there's a jazz band or even a soloist on stage. That's not necessarily the music you're hearing is not necessarily being played, obviously, by that musician. That's usually an actor. You know, we can all tell. Most of the musicians watching this will be able to, you know, identify with this. When you're watching a show and you see someone playing guitar on stage, and you're immediately looking at their hand to see if it's in time, which usually it isn't. You know, and if they're real musicians, and usually they're paid actors. But so back to the question. Yes, there are demands for it. It would be specific to each library, but there's nothing that says you can't do your own solo album of, you know, 10 or 12 tracks is typical. Again, there's always exceptions to the rule, but 10 or 12 tracks, I wouldn't go less than 2 minutes a track. Try and at least hit the 2-minute mark. And produce them as well as you can with whatever tools you have accessible to you. And the obvious things are try and make sure there's no clicks or pops, or, you know, your cat walks into the room and you hear your door creak, or, you know, just the obvious things. But there is demand for that kind of stuff. It just depends on who you're pitching it to and where it's going. The other thing you could do is market it yourself and do the album and maybe take little excerpts. I put excerpts on my Instagram stuff all the time of stuff I'm working on, and just little bits and pieces to put it out there, and use hashtags, you know, production music, library music, or, you know, hey, I'm working on this, or I just finished this album, hopefully to pitch to libraries. And of course, you can follow various music libraries on these different platforms, Facebook and Instagram, whatever. And, you know, if you're lucky, maybe they'll follow you back if they like what you're doing. Yeah, just there's other ways to get the music out there. But yes, you could do solo albums, and especially because anything minimalistic is sought after and valued in any genre. If I just did a YouTube video on this too, is that minimalism is so it's timeless, it's valuable. It gets used all the time. And a lot of times when I do, again, a full album or big tracks with all these instruments, when I ultimately provide all the files to the publisher, I'll create what are called stems, and I'll break it down. So I might give them just the drums, just the strings, just the guitars, so they can mix the track the way they like it. They might want to remove the drums, and they can do that and still have the essence of the song. But in those files, the other things I'll include are what are called reduced mixes, or light mixes. And all that means is basically you have the song or the track, but it's a reduced version. And a lot of times I'll see in my reports that they'll use those tracks over the big full track. It just seems to work better in in TV placements. So a solo album would be great for that reason, especially if it's got, it has the right purpose. Like I said, jazz might be fine, but if you do an album that has emotion to it, and it's just simple and subtle, it fits in a lot of scenes more than a track that's full and beefy would, because there's always dialogue going along, or other things happening in the scene. You don't want to get in the way of that. So that's why subtle, solo, just minimalism kind of works really well with that. So to answer the question, yes, you can do solo stuff and it's applicable. Yeah. Is there another question, or you want me to keep going here?
I can keep going. I got no questions yet.
I guess another thing I would say too is that I have a studio full of instruments. I was, from a young age, my extended family is from the East Coast. So I was brought up around kitchen parties, and there was always something lying around. It was a mandolin or an accordion or a fiddle or something that I was making noise on. So I have a lot of instruments. I don't play any of them exceptionally well. I'm not a guitar shredder. I would never step on stage with a cello, but I have a cello. And drums, again, I'm not a drummer, but I can do simple stuff. You don't have to be a multi-instrumentalist to do this, to get into this industry. You might only be a vocalist, not only, but I just mean that might be your only instrument. And that's fine. You can reach out to somebody and collaborate with them online. You never have to meet them. Guitar, piano, whatever it is that you play, again, the music that goes into these television shows and that kind of thing aren't necessarily, again, big full band productions. Yes, you hear a lot of orchestral stuff, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like, again, to the previous question, it could just be solo guitar. It could be a few notes on the piano. You don't have to be a virtuoso, a piano. It could just be a few notes. Maybe you're an electronic producer and everything's in the box, like in the computer, and it's just, dragging and dropping different manipulated sounds that you use. I want to emphasize, you don't have to have a bunch of instruments, and you don't have to be a virtuoso. You don't have to be, it's more about, again, that emotion of the music and where it's going. And if it's supportive, you never know who's looking at it and what they're looking for. But again, it's hopefully the tracks you have written support someone's project in the way they hope. And in doing that, 9 times out of 10, it's not the guitar shredder, or a really flashy drummer. It's not that music that is getting used there. That's great and impressive to look at, on social media. But in TV, the more important thing is the picture, the story, the dialogue, the script, not the music. Yeah. What else we got here? I kind of covered that one. What is production music library? We kind of did that. Was there anything else while
I haven't gotten any new questions, but I do have a question of my own. What do you do about writer's block? If, like, when you're writing something for emotions like that, you really have to think about a lot. Like, what do you do about that?
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. It happens a lot. Again, a lot of times because I use the ideas that when I start a project or an album, I think, well, this is great. I have all these ideas, and I'll write pen and paper. I like to have pen and paper. I'll write these ideas down and I'll blast through them, and I'll be like, what now? I'll listen to YouTube. I'll listen to other artists that write in that specific style. If I can afford to take a break or walk away, then I certainly do that. Just to get out, change the scenery. Cabin fever in the small room, and just kind of separate myself for a little bit. Sometimes you have to try and play through it. Another way I'll do it is pick up a different instrument. If I'm, say, at the piano is my go-to, keyboard is my go-to. But a lot of times I'll just pick up a different instrument. It'll inspire me a different way because obviously I'll play something different that I wouldn't play on piano. If I have the cello, maybe it's a noise I'm making. Maybe it's a rhythm on some kind of hand percussion. Guitar, mandolin. Again, it's just trying something different. Sometimes will inspire ideas that you obviously, for obvious reasons, don't get with a different instrument. So changing up the instrumentation, changing up the environment. If I can get out for a little bit, I'll do that. If I can listen to other artists, if it's a specific project and I'm writing in a certain style, a lot of times I can, like I said, I'll go to YouTube and just hear what other people have done, and, be inspired and come up with ideas as well. So, but writer's block is huge. It's a very big, very big part of it. It's really draining physically and emotionally to be creative for so long. If it's an album. So yeah, I try those things, and it doesn't always work. Sometimes you're just banging your head against the wall, but that's the creative process, right? It's a love-hate, love-hate thing. Why don't I do this? I'll play a couple tracks that, and I kind of explain what I was doing in these. I'll show you first. I see. No, that's not. Oh, there we go. Hang on. Sorry, that wasn't good. I was going to show you a picture of the studio, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I'll go to the music. So here's a couple things that I've been kind of working on. I did recently as part of a pitch, so for a TV show, some music that had to have kind of a dark, ominous, sinister kind of feel to it, with, I guess, hip hop elements, but not over the top. So like a track you would hear, it's you'll pick up on it. It's a little more cinematic, but let me see if this place. Can you hear this? No, that's not coming through. Okay, hang on. Sorry about that. And this totally worked in pre. I'm just going to go down to really quick. Audio settings. And sorry about this. It was. No. So I'm gonna stop it. I'm not sure why that. We'll try it again maybe in a bit. I don't want to delay this too long, but yeah, basically it was just kind of one of the goals was to have this hip hop track that it was kind of dark and ominous without being too on the nose for for the genre, so to speak, more of a hint towards it. So what I did in that case was just kept the percussion super simple, just like an 808, and again, some really simple percussion, simple bass, and these kind of eerie moving pads, different soundscapes. Try to sound design them as best I can for, just so that it's not simply out of the box and you hit a chord and it plays, what was, without any manipulation. You kind of make it your own. So I did a bunch of those and tried to create these, as we talked earlier about playing to a narrative, like something that is just more, I'll try this one more time, more, it just fits the genre, that like what the scene, like that dark. Is this gonna go desktop too? No, it's still. hear that? Okay, so hear this. So it's really, can you hear me talking at the same time? Okay. It's just really understated. It's not, in your face. You can hear a scene or see a scene. A little bit of a build there, and it kind of reveals and keeps going. Keep going a little bit. Right, so dare say repetitive. There's different things that happen. There's a cello in there now. Bass. So it kind of, it builds through it. So I did a few of these. Another one you'll notice has the same kind of feel to it. Right? Again, just subtle. So you can tell that it's not something you would hear on, Spotify or something like that. It's more cinematic. It's understated in these cases. Again, always starting it with that simple kind of pads, I guess we'll call them drones, but they have movement to them. It's not just like you're hitting a chord and it's just playing this. And then an editor could cut at that point before the drums drop. So you're hearing all these little elements, like these I call them transitional effects, but these builds and these sweeps and that kind of thing. Again, really important and really useful to editors who can cut those pieces in. They wouldn't necessarily use this whole track, but there's whole, different sections of the track they can use. Let me just play one more here of that style. This one here starts with piano, a little bit of piano. This is a little bit more of a motif. So when I deliver this, I can take this top line, this melody, I can remove that entirely. So we're more to the understated section. Again, with the cello, just to have that, that was just a personal choice to have that organic element in there. So that was kind of, you see how they all have that same kind of feel to it. Another example. Here's a couple of tracks, completely different. Obviously more acoustic, raw, organic. This was part of something I had done but I had noticed I'd done a couple of albums a few years back that were very Western, I guess you could say, but like dark, ominous Western kind of thing. And a lot of those tracks were getting like a lot of organic instrumentation. They had drums, mandolins, fiddles, all that kind of stuff. And in the most unexpected shows, like it wasn't, what you think. It just didn't really work well. very similar. Again, hear the wind chimes. I stole my mom's wind chimes and recorded them. Anytime you can record your own sounds, I strongly recommend it. Just again, it's something nobody else is going to be able to pull out of a sample library and create. It's your own unique fingerprint, and it goes a long way to have an authentic sound. Because it's not just the sound; you're also getting the sound of your environment, your room, your microphone, your equipment. So it really gives you a unique sound. Right. So yeah, you kind of get the idea of that whole dark Western thing. When I write, again, depending on what I'm writing for, sometimes it's an opportunity, sometimes it's a client has asked me to do something, and sometimes it's just for my own catalog. So it really depends, but I try and theme and pick out what instruments I'm going to use. If it's more cinematic, then obviously I build a template that has that kind of sound. So like those hip hop tracks all have a similar sound and vibe and tone, but they're still unique to each other. What else can I show? Here's a few that are there. I'm going to call them investigative tracks. So without the urban kind of hip hop feel, but they still have that eerie, so you can imagine them in a detective show or kind of who did it type thing. So when I submit these, again, I would stem this all out. So a lot of the percussion that you hear, all those percussive pieces, I can completely remove them. So you would just get some of the more synth-based type stuff. What else do we have here? So again, just eerie, ominous, dark. Is there any questions while I'm? Yeah, there we go. Is there any questions while in the middle of this?
Yeah, there's a question. How do you come up with names for instrumental tracks? When I search for stock music for videos, it always seems like the tracks have appropriate, accurate names.
It's hit and miss for me sometimes. Things that you should be conscious of, and I'm actually guilty, so kind of do as I say, not as I do, but they should be short and concise. Sometimes I use longer tracks, but imagine these tracks are going to end up in a searchable catalog. Think of it, a different version of Google, but when clients or networks go to a music library and they're looking for a track, and they're going to use search words and terms. A lot of times the metadata will be entered by the library, and sometimes the library will ask you to do all the metadata. It's a tedious job, but and we can talk about that in a minute, but they're going to search your tracks. And imagine, just like Google, imagine a list of tracks coming up. You want your track to stand out, to pop out. So before they've even listened to one note of, the 10, 15, 20 tracks in front of them, you really want to best your chances for them to, oh, number 7, that's interesting. I like that. Or that title seems to be what I'm looking for without even having heard it. So you can name your tracks, accordingly to help your chances. It actually does help. Try not to be obscure. July 11th or August 11th. Like, even though it's important to you, and that's great if you're doing an artist album release, it has meaning and significance. But naming tracks that are going into a musical library, they need to have a practicality, functionality to them. So try and keep your tracks, the titles, short, descriptive if you can. Obviously, like some of those dark, ominous tracks, I wouldn't, name like Happy Holidays or, something that was obviously not what the track was about. If you can describe the track in your words, golden, awesome. Because they're going to see the titles quite often. And if they can choose your track because that title works for them, then it helps you. Yeah. Was there two parts to that, or was that the question?
I believe that was the question. Yep.
Yeah. Was there another question there, or do you want to keep going?
I had a question of my own, but if you wanted to keep going, that's totally all right.
No, go ahead while I'm here.
I was just gonna ask, do you think of the keys, like if you're in a minor or a major, like do you think about scales when you're writing? Do you think about your modes, or do you just kind of go for feeling?
I think about key signatures in the sense that if I'm doing a whole album or a series of tracks, I don't want them all in the same key. I want to kind of give it so they don't all sound exactly the same. Even though they're not going in an album, it's still, for presentation purposes, I want them to have a different feel. So I'll intentionally try and change the keys to the tracks I'm working on. Modulation is usually a bad thing I shouldn't say bad, but typically I don't modulate my tracks. So like I don't start out in C sharp or transpose throughout the track. And same with tempo. I typically have a BPM that I stick with. There are some exceptions to the rule, but my BPM I try and stick with per track, and it might fluctuate throughout the series of tracks, like the album. And the same with key. There's no specific key I go to. If I pick up a guitar, my own personal, I typically grab a G chord. Doesn't mean I'll write the song in that, but I gravitate towards that. Or sit at a piano, E flat or C might be, what I go to. So I mix and match, yeah. Give some other examples here.
On that note, actually,
yeah.
If you write a song and later find out you have another song in the same key, do you just play it in the same? You change it entirely, or do you just keep it?
No, I just keep it. Again, these are not hard rules. They're just things I've over the years kind of gravitated towards. But if on an album I might have 3 or 4 or 5 tracks in the same key, and that's totally cool. There's nothing wrong with that. I just try, to not have this. If someone's searching comes up with my whole album and they like the theme of the album and they want to listen to all the tracks, by the time they reach the 12th track, I don't want it to sound like they've just listened to 12 tracks all in the exact same key. So I'll mix it up in that respect. But yeah, it's totally cool to have, a few tracks, in my opinion, that are the same key. Yeah, just leave it like that. Where are we going here? Here's a couple Christmas tracks. Holidays are always any season, any seasonal festive holiday kind of thing is always in demand. So if that's something you can do, that includes Halloween, different holidays. I've done albums that were politically themed. So, the big pomp and circumstance, hurrah, and to the kind of villainesque, political opponent kind of talking trash about the other. So I've done everything. And Christmas CDs have been CDs. When I started, they were CDs, so it's still a term used. But discs, albums, that's still something that if that's something you can write in, you have your sleigh bells, then that's always in demand. And a lot of times, public domain covers of Christmas songs, Christmas carols are sought after as well for a lot of these music libraries. So just something to keep in mind if that's the path you're going down. One I had done, I haven't shared that yet. Hang on. Where iTunes? Here we go. You hear that? So I don't know if this was the one or not. There was one ABC, I think, The Great Christmas Light Fight. It's a show on ABC where in a community all the houses try and outdo each other with their lights. This was a track that I'm pretty sure got placed on it. It's pretty repetitive. It just has these kind of vocal staccato type passages. You hear electric guitar coming in, and you'll hear, like I was talking about earlier, how they grow. The track grows towards the end. I won't play the whole thing, but you'll get the idea. But it started out with that piano that you still hear underneath. Kind of a drop. And just some drums underneath. But now you have that big orchestral bell. And they're bigger drums. It's not like an acoustic kit. They're more epic drums. Right. This was another Christmas one. It just kind of, pretty cute kind of. So almost lullaby-ish, but with the more pleasant kind of feel. And then your sleigh bells. And it's not like a little bit orchestral, so it's not like I'm holding these sleigh bells shaking through the entire thing. They're a little bit subtle panned, left and right, and so that's a little bit more of the, orchestral type thing. Go to this for a second. So anything seasonal, holiday, Halloween, I think I said that, but yeah, that kind of stuff for these special times, they get sought after and picked up quite a bit. And a lot of times, if you get in with a library, if they accept your music, you get into their catalog, a lot of times you can get, I'm saying briefs, but you can get on a mailing list, and they'll request certain tracks. They may send it out to a select few composers. Maybe it'll go out to all their composers. Because aside from having a catalog, that doesn't guarantee that anybody searching that catalog is going to find what they want. So in those cases, when a client needs something and they can't find it, a lot of times these libraries will send an email out to their writers, contributors, asking, hey, does anybody have solo jazz piano, right? Like whatever the case, whatever that is. And I've had some pretty weird different requests come through, but yeah, if that's, there's opportunity beyond simply having your music in the catalog and hoping that you'll get picked, because all as you can do that's in your control is create the best production value you can, a track that, sorry, I got a dry spot. So the best you can do is just follow those etiquette rules, no clicks, pops, pardon me. Create a great track. There's a chance they could refuse the track. Pardon me, sorry about that. In many cases, rejection is a big part of this industry. You have to have thick skin, but at the same time, you have to understand it's not necessarily because your music is bad. There's a million different reasons that a library could decline. Maybe they already have too many of that genre. It could be that it's not quite the same as all the other tracks in that genre that they have, so it's not cohesive. Again, there's a lot of reasons beyond your music sucking that they could deny or decline you, the tracks being accepted. And it's a tough go, because there is a vetting process, or a process where they listen to your tracks and decide whether they want to, have your tracks in their catalog. I've hundreds over the years. I've gotten rejected by so many libraries, and that's just it. There's so many libraries out there. You just say, okay, great, thank you. Again, with a professional thing, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank them and move on to the next library. Don't burn any bridges. That industry is a lot smaller than you might think. They a lot of them go to conferences and are buddies and friends and pals that talk amongst each other. So yeah, I'll always be professional. You don't know who knows who, that, if you burn that bridge, you're going to create a bad name for yourself. But rejection is part of it, that, your music just might not be a fit for them. Okay, no problem. I've had situations where I've submitted to a library, not been accepted, and then submitted that same music to another library, was accepted, and ultimately got that music placed into TV. So it's not always, don't take it so hard. It's not necessarily about the music. Any other questions?
Yeah, got a few questions here.
Mhm.
So when you write, how important would you say orchestral arranging skills or jazz or classical theory are to your work? When I compare modern film composers like Zimmer to say John Williams, I feel like modern work is a little more diatonic, which is not worse by any means, just different.
Right. I don't, at this point in my career, I really wish I had gone through the Royal Conservatory. I'm not trained. I'm not formally trained. I've learned by ear. But over the years, having worked with, orchestral mock-ups and that kind of thing, I've gotten to know the real world limitations of, for example, you're not going to hold a tuba for 5 minutes, on a note. Like, you get to know the physical capabilities and limitations of some of these instruments. And because it's electronic, it doesn't mean you can play 64th notes on some of these instruments, even though MIDI will let you do that. And as far as, the whole, how, whether it's classical and traditional, as far as the orchestral pieces themselves, pardon me, sometimes it's very important, and it really depends on the other end. Like, there are companies that will take these mock-ups and orchestrations, orchestrate them into sheet music, so an orchestra can actually play them, And in those cases, it's not that they need to be, because example given was that not all composers follow that path, but different people in the chain that are involved in that, orchestrating it, need to understand the music. As far as effectiveness, I don't know that one is necessarily more effective. I think just, different. I've never followed that approach. I know there's lots of composers out there that can't necessarily read or don't, conduct their own music. Some of the big composers, right? Some do, some don't. I had heard, I don't know if this is true. If someone has to fact check this, but Danny Elfman was not classically trained, or doesn't read music, or isn't. That's not his background. I know he was in a group, Oingo Boingo or something, before he got into composing. But yeah, I don't know that there's it's two different paths. I didn't go down that path. I wish I had at this point, just because it would help me understand things a little better when I am writing. But I guess the makeup of that is that I've always just gone by feel, and tried to keep a world limitation on that too.
That fact checked was correct. Hey, Elfman is self-taught and has no formal musical training.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. And he's another one of those huge Hollywood composers, right? But yeah, I think if you can learn and study music and understand, absolutely, I think it's incredibly valuable. I didn't go that path, but I think it's valuable if you have that. Pardon me, have that background. Absolutely, probably make writing a little easier. Yeah. Any other questions there?
Yeah. I'll ask one of their questions first. I also have my own question, but
sure.
I'll ask one of theirs first. What do you think about websites like Taxi, where you buy a subscription and get access to submitting songs to various people / companies?
Yeah. Very familiar with Taxi. I'm not a member. However, a lot of there's two kind of schools of thought on this, and especially on the internet, there's people that don't pay to play. They feel it's predatory. It's different opinions. My personal view on that is you have to do what you feel is of value and worth it to you. I know that there are people that have had success with Taxi, that they pay their annual fee to it, and then I think you still pay to submit each song to opportunities, and it works for them, and they get placements, and they make contacts and connections, and they do very well. I don't know what that percentage is. I can't give you numbers. And I'm sure if you ask them, they tell you they're quite happy and they think it's great. I don't go that route. Years and years ago, around the time of the video game placement thing, I was with Taxi. I got lots of forwards. I never did land a placement through them, and my music probably just wasn't fit for this. The reality of it is my music wasn't fit for whoever was listening to it at that time. I wouldn't say it was a bad experience. It was an experience that I tried. It didn't work, so I moved on. It really has to be about you and whether you want to pay. The only thing I would say, in any platform where you're paying to submit your music to opportunities, is that if they are, whoever they are, then asking to take shares, which Taxi does not do, as far as I understand, but if they're asking you to then take credit from your writer's credit or more than that initial fee, I personally don't agree with that. I don't think that's right. I think that if you've paid whatever the membership fee is, and in what case. I don't think they should be dipping in, definitely not to your writer share or asking anything more of that. But again, I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't really understand the workings of where taxi's at today. It's been 15 years. It's been a long time. So yeah, I don't necessarily, one way or the other. I think it's really up to you. A lot of people will say, do not pay for opportunities. Do not do it. And it's up to you. There are a lot of opportunities out there, music libraries, platforms that you don't have to pay, and there's good chances of your music getting published and placed into TV, film. Yeah.
Cool. My question was going back to, you were talking about when in a song you like to build it up.
Yeah.
Do you have any, like, what's your techniques for building it up? Like, other than just like the musical instruments building up, is there any recording techniques you have for making it big?
Yeah, it's obviously so the instruments, of course, would do that, but adding bass gives a lot more depth to any track, right? If I started it with a simple instrument, I'm not going to say piano or acoustic guitar again, but whatever instrument I started it with, maybe it's just glockenspiel, and it's just simple. And the more you add to that, as soon as you add bass, whether it's synthetic or real bass or whatever, that immediately builds it. Like, there's just that warmth, provided you have immediately builds it. Like, there's just that warmth, provided you have speakers or earphones that will pick that up. So adding bass will do it, the frequency bass, but then drums, adding drums will do it. And a lot of times with drums, I'll add more drums that are in more of the hi-hat frequency range. So it could be shakers, it could be various sound design ticks or different rhythms. And then you can double that with, I'm saying, mid kind of frequency things, maybe, a snare or other hand percussions or something. And depending on what genre you're working in too, of course, but, and then of course, some of the big drums that you're working with, there's sample libraries. There's so many different kinds of drums you can buy, and just that have that big, massive, epic, almost trailer style sound. Actually, I just bought a library a couple days ago by a company called Heavyocity, and they just put out a new library called Damage 2, and it's a lot of these big, epic sounds and drums and rhythms, and done in this big studio. It's really cool, but it would give you that, help you create that great big monstrous build. And of course you add your different instruments, whatever those are. But drums are a big way to do that. Bass, because that's, that's at low end. And another way to do that too is to kind of give the not illusion, but it really emphasizes it, is when you do rises and builds and swells. So something that starts out very minimal and then eventually to this huge, it's just that again, that swell to that big sound. It just creates more of a dramatic effect, right? And you can, again, there's sound effects that will help, that will do that rise kind of thing, but then you can make your own too. So you might take a snare hit with a lot of reverb on it. So record that. So it's this big crack and this long sustain, and then you reverse that in your DAW. So it becomes like a big, sound. Or it could be a piano note. You hit a low piano note and let it ring. So boom, and you let that ring for a couple bars. And the same thing, you record that to audio, you flip that around, and then you really do it with anything. As long as it has that decay when you first record it, and then you simply turn it around, place it where you want, and help build that, you know, that big swell. You know, anything else that we can?
Nope, I have no new questions in here, and I have no questions of my own. So.
No problem. We've got a couple more minutes. I don't know what else I was going to share. So some of the questions, you probably asked the questions that I was asked. Yeah, I guess I would close with a few tips. If, you know, kind of music libraries, production music was something path you wanted to go down. The best, I guess, pieces of advice or tips that I would give, and I kind of already touched on them, but basically, you just be yourself, be honest. Don't try and spin a bunch of hype that you can't ultimately live up to. Your music's always going to speak for itself. So if you're talking to a music library and you know, you're saying that your music is this and it's that, they're going to listen to it and they're going to know right away if it is or it isn't, like if it's the real deal or not. They listen to thousands and thousands of tracks. There's no fooling them. There's no, you know, they know what good music is and what's not. So it just, and again, I was talking about those relationships. It's always want to start a relationship out, you know, just being honest, just being yourself. So yeah, be professional, be yourself, be honest. Those relationships are super important. If you're an artist and you have an image and a brand and that's what you promote, that's totally cool. That's something different than what I'm talking about. Certainly sell that image and that brand and promote that. But when you're talking to someone in a business sense or a professional relationship sense, yeah, just be cool and honest. And you know, I touched on it, but rejection is a big part of this industry, and it just happens. It's not something to get too bent out of shape about. It happens at every level in the game. There's you know, hopefully over time it happens less, but then again, you get to deal with bigger projects and there's more on the line, so it still happens. As far as what libraries and how to approach them, again, as I said, just, you know, Google's your friend, because be wary of people offering lists or to sell you lists. Don't do that. The information is out there, and it's really important for you as an artist or a writer, a producer, to research those libraries that you find to see if they're a fit for you and you're a fit for them. There's no one size fits all. So I would strongly recommend do your research and yeah, just educate yourself before you reach out to these people. Yeah, it's a long game. It's probably the most important piece of advice I could give is that it's a really long game, and even when you get into it, so you get your music placed in a few libraries, by the time your music gets picked up, placed, and put into a show, easily be a year or 2 years. It's not something that happens. It's not an opportunity that happens, you know, in a few weeks or even a couple months. It typically takes a long time. If you know that and you're willing to put in the work and you know, all the while doing your other things, maybe you're a live musician as well, or singer-songwriter as well, and you have other avenues of music, let them, you know, sustain you and keep you happy in producing music, and do this as something that ultimately will earn you money. But yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time. Yeah. it's kind of all it's kind of all I got.
Yeah,
I'm sure we could talk longer, but
yeah, that's a perfect time to wrap up. I appreciate you making the time to be here today and talk about your experiences and
oh,
knowledge
my
of
pleasure. I hope you guys found it valuable, and
yeah,
I appreciate everyone having me on. Thank you.
thank you. Enjoy your night and thanks again.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Take care.
Bye.